Hi, everyone. We want to welcome you to our introductory podcast, if you will, on Married to Ministry. My name is Donisha Norwood Smith, and with me today is Miss,
Marcy Clark.
and we will be your hosts moving forward for this podcast. This is a conversation that we hope to have with all of you to just invite you into basically our living rooms, our spaces, to have a candid conversation about the things that impact us as we serve in ministry along with our spouses. So, welcome, and let's just get into it today. Marcy, let's tell the people a little bit about ourselves. Tell me a little bit about you first.
All right. Well, I am from Chicago, Illinois. I was raised there until I was about 15. Then my family relocated to Washington, D.C. I finished high school in Washington, D.C. I went to Howard University, met my husband. I'm fast forwarding through all the details, just giving you the highlights. So we met, then we got married, then we lived happily ever after.
Ooh.
Yes. The sun set and we just walked on the beach in beds of tulips and rose petals.
Wouldn't that be great?
But in reality, we got married and we moved to Minnesota, and that is where the trials began. Minnesota was our training ground and our testing ground, and it was after the birth of our fourth child. We have four children. They're stair steps. So everybody's right. The first two are 18 months apart, and then about 2 years apart for the others. So after the birth of our fourth child, I was dealing with serious postpartum depression. And I just couldn't get a hold on myself. And I couldn't get a hold on nothing. I was just like, okay, a great day is everybody got a meal, nobody got lost. And I kept a hold on my emotions. That was pretty much my definition of a great day at that stage in my life. And my husband had met a minister, Keith Johnson. Then I met his wife, and I reached out to his wife because by God's grace, I realized how important it was for me to build community. At that time, my husband was a youth pastor, and we had been to a couple of churches, and we had experienced a tremendous amount of drama.
Yes.
I had experienced a lot of isolation and rejection because I knew instinctively that in a traditional church setting, I would not be able to cultivate the genuine relationships that I needed for my own emotional health and humanity. So I had already become accustomed to reaching out to other women as the Lord gave me like a leading. And I literally I reached out to Andrea and I said, hey, maybe we could pray for our husbands. And then Andrea said, well, we're going to have a get together with some couples at our house. So why don't you all join us? And I was like, yes, thank you, Jesus. Yes, fellowship. So we came over to their house, with our dish, and that's where the Smiths were. And Danisha and you and I, we just like hit it off, with that type of, like I said earlier, type of ghetto loyalty, because it was like, I got your back and you got my back. And, we could share and cry and express our frustrations in a safe place. And we maintained that connection over the years, over the decades, and the vicissitudes of life, dealing with the challenges of being in the ministry. And I just want to say, thank you for being a friend, not to sound like the Golden Girls, but I mean, that's real. Thank you for being a friend because the level of isolation when you're in a church setting, when you're in a place that most people go to find security and help in a time of need, and you yourself cannot get any of that,
Yes,
that can be devastating.
indeed.
And when you consider the fact that I was 21 years old when I got married, so that by the time I had our fourth child, that put me right at about 28.
Hmm.
And man, that was a lot to process at that level of maturity.
Mm,
So I thank God for his grace and mercy.
yeah.
Then we need it, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, indeed. So, well, thank you, Marcy. You know I love and adore you. So, yeah, I I too married young. We got married for 22 and 23 to my high school sweetheart, of course. And we almost didn't make it to the altar because he confessed his call to ministry just before, while we were engaged. And I was like, no, let me tell you something. There's three people I don't want to marry: a pastor, a fireman, right? And a police officer. Why? Why, Danisha? Why don't you want to marry those people? They all can be called away someplace to serve in the middle of the night. And the work is challenging. It's challenging for the individual. It can be traumatic for the individual and definitely traumatic for the spouse and family. I didn't want that life, but God had another plan, I suppose. So we married. We have two beautiful daughters. And I, like Marcy, had my kids kind of back to back and trying to serve in ministry, trying to find my place. And Keith Johnson, the connector, and his wife, Andrea, Keith Johnson married my husband and I. So that's our connection to them. But when we were invited to that small group, it was a breath of fresh air because ministry is hard. For us, we don't have spaces where we can have conversations, and especially with the spouse and the wife, with other like-minded people who are serving, people who get you. So that small group, although it had its complexities, was good for us at that time. It really was. At the time where we made this connection with this Bible study, my husband and I had just moved back from Ohio, where we were serving in ministry, and came out of a very stressful and painful, quick 12-month serving time that impacted us. We didn't realize, almost to the depths of our souls, and nearly led us to a place of divorce. But thank God for his grace and community and friends, we were able to recover. So I praise God for that. But yet and still, in our serving, we still have our challenges, and we still need spaces where we can be ourselves, we can be honest, and we can be vulnerable. And so, Marcy, I thank you for all the times when I was like, listen, I need a session on your couch. I need a moment. And the prayers, the powerful, fervent prayers of my sister are what carried me through. So I want to say thank you too for being my friend in some of my toughest hours. And that's what our time together is all about. How can we show ourselves friendly when we're in pain? How do we build these communities? Which means we have to be vulnerable. What does that look like? And how do we find the space to identify our purpose, our calling, alongside our partners as they serve in ministry, so that we can have a voice and a space to just be whoever God created us to be. So that's why we're here. Yeah. So Marcy, let's share with them just a snippet. Let's talk about our kids, because children, woo, child. Marcy, you mentioned you have four newly married and four kids, and in ministry. Your husband was a youth pastor. How was that for you? And what do you think about how did that impact your kids?
So at the time, in the beginning, our children were really, really small.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they really had an appreciation for, they saw their dad, he might be preaching sometimes. It really wasn't that big of a deal when they were younger.
Mm-hmm.
However, I what I did realize was that I was being scrutinized.
Mm. Let's
So
talk about it.
I nursed, and I should add, just to add context, we homeschooled all four of our children from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and because we chose to homeschool, because I was a stay-at-home mom, that made the church isolation that
Mm.
much more devastating to my soul.
Yeah.
Because it was like I didn't really have the outlet that I felt like I needed and deserved. And so being under extra scrutiny, and there was an older woman, bless her heart, who sat in the back and she would write you letters.
Mm.
And so she actually wrote me some letters about how she felt my children were misbehaving.
Oh, wow.
Our oldest child is a girl, and she was very active. She was not the type of child that would sit still, just like her mom, because I was into everything. She was in everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be so tired on Sunday morning. Like you wake up, you got to get dressed. You got to look good. You got to look, you can't just look presentable.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look good
Right.
because people are going to be sizing you up one side and down the other.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
How do you do that with little kids?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and then I don't just have little kids. I had a little kid, and usually I was pregnant. So I'm hungry, or I'm just, oh, maybe I had a rough night. And it was just like, Lord, how do I just put myself together?
Mm-hmm.
And I managed, I had to put on some makeup. I had to put on my pantyhose. I mean, it was like I had to, because I couldn't. Unfortunately, I wasn't at a church that was come as you are,
Mm-hmm.
and how much I've lamented. Like now that I'm older, now that my children. I mean, now my youngest child is 22. He's the age that I was when his oldest sister was born.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how do you, when you're that young, how how do you keep it all together? So here's the deal. Two things God gave me.
Mm.
Two crucial things. Number one, priorities.
Yes.
I decided that my relationship with God, and second, my husband, and third, my children.
Oh.
Okay, those were my three top priorities. Church was not in there.
Mm. Talk about it.
It was not in there.
Mm-hmm.
Being a people pleaser was not in there. Okay, that meant since I did not have to please the people at church, I could go to the bathroom and cry because of the pain that I was experiencing.
Mm.
And that was okay. And I didn't have to pretend. Now, my husband was not the senior pastor, thank God. God
Mm-hmm.
knows what we can bear.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God he was the associate minister and the youth pastor. So I praise God, and I think that was crucial at that point in my life where God just gave me the knowledge. Hey, you got to prioritize. You can't handle all these other issues. Like no, 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 no. And the second thing God gave me was I instinctively knew that I had to create community, and so I was very intentional about reaching out to other ladies. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure I used to reach out to you, and there were other like I would meet people in my neighborhood or a friend of a friend. And the Lord blessed me to create a community. There were a very, very few people. And by few, I mean maybe two ladies.
Mm.
There may have been two ladies in that church of say 150 people. There were two ladies that I felt were genuine about how they perceived me and responded to me.
Yeah.
Other than that, I felt like I needed to guard my heart.
Yes.
And I felt like I needed to watch my children.
Mm.
I was not going to allow other people that I did not know to care for my children. That's just not me. Hey, everybody's got to do what they're comfortable doing.
Mhm.
But for me, the church did not have a youth ministry
Yeah.
for little kids
Right.
that I felt comfortable with. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it was all on me, on,
Mhm.
and then I'll just say this very, very last thing. Because we had these young children close together, I would be sitting in church maybe with three children
Mhm.
or two children and pregnant with the third.
Mhm.
So I'm sitting in church, like dealing with these little kids, and my husband's sitting up in the pulpit.
That's
Do
right.
you, do you see where I'm going, right?
I
So
do.
he's sitting there,
Mhm.
and I felt like he was looking out at me, being judgmental, like, why don't you, why don't, and I was like, yo, I need help.
Mhm.
So my husband was like, do you expect me to come out of the pulpit to help you? I was like, yeah, I do.
Mhm.
Well, I don't agree. Okay, tell you what, you ask the pastor's wife and I'll ask the pastor. This is what my husband said. Okay, so I said, okay. So I go ask the pastor's wife, okay, we have these little children. I'm tired and I need help. This is too much for me to handle.
Mhm.
Do you think that my husband should come out of the pulpit to help me? She said, no. She said, you need to um, have relationships with other women in the church to help you with children.
Mm.
Well, he asked her husband, who was the senior pastor.
Mhm.
The senior pastor said, if she, meaning your wife, if your wife has a problem, you both have a problem.
Mm.
You need to go and help her.
Ooh.
So
Ooh. Well, praise God.
at least every other week or so, he would come, he would walk out of the pulpit to where I was sitting, which was usually toward the back. And he would take one of our children out to, maybe stand up or, so I could even enjoy the service. So now I got two responses. The older women looked at me with scorn,
Mm.
like, what's wrong with her having
Mm.
him do that?
Mm.
The younger women thanked us. They
Wow.
said, thank you for setting an example.
Wow.
Thank you that now my husband realizes he should be part of this process.
Mm.
So, yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow. I'm like, wow. I vaguely remember this story of us talking about this when I was in Minnesota too. Um, yeah, that's deep. That's deep. I want to come back. I want to come back to a couple pieces of things that you said too, because it's triggering. It's something. Um, similarly, my husband was a youth pastor when Marcy and I met, and at this church, and it was a Methodist church, so it was a little bit different. They did have childcare for us, but again, these are my babies. I don't know if I trust people right with my kids, but I was willing to at least try a couple of times, and it seemed to serve well. But very similarly, I too did not feel like I had there was any support, or there was, I don't know, I feel like word better words, I'm not gonna say support. I didn't feel supported in that space a lot of times. I didn't really like the church. I didn't have one to go. And for a while I was like, well, you can go serve over here. I'm going over here. I got to do what I got to do for me. And because this ain't it. This is not it. So that created some tension. Our daughters, because they were small, the youngest one, she's always just, let me go play. Let me go play. I want to go to children's church. I want to go play. The oldest one, she was, whatever you say, mommy, I'm going to do. And that was fine when they were younger. But as they got older, and I'm starting to hear more of this now that they are adults, they needed their dad. They needed their dad's presence. And as I process this a little bit more, I remember the times of them saying, mommy, is daddy working? Where's daddy? Is he working? Daddy's working again. Um, there's this, we really do a lot to hold it down in the home, and for Marcy, for you to homeschool your kids, um, and pour out yourself. You were with your children 24/7. You needed a break. You needed community more. I was working outside the home. I had a full-time job and doing with the kids, but you, my sister, you really needed the supportive community. And so I'm grateful that the pastor would say, no, you need to come down and help your wife. Because if she's had a problem, you got a problem. That spoke volumes. And I wish we were in settings more where senior leadership would give permission for people to be human and to take care of what's most important. Your first ministry, which is your family, your home, your wife, your spouse. It would save us a lot. Oh, another thing that you said that struck me was, this older woman decided she was going to write you a note to tell you about yourself and how you was parenting or raising your kids. When I think about Titus 2, it would have been more helpful if she had said, baby, let me help you, right? Let me take one of the babies for you. Will you let me do that for you? Versus trying to scold you about how you're raising your kids. And I think about, and now that we are older women in the church, what is my responsibility in being an example and being a support and being maybe a confidant for some? Because there are people just like you were, Marcy, in the trenches day in, day out, trying to hold it down as best you could, who need a little TLC and some grace. Can we show each other some grace?
Yes.
Where is the grace? Another thing you said that struck me was, you have your babies, and I remember these days too. You have your babies and you're doing all you can to put yourself together, fix your hair, do your makeup, one's on your leg, one's on your hip, one might be on your back. And trying to make yourself look presentable in church spaces, right? Where you have to put on this costume.
Yes.
That has nothing to do with entering into a space of worship with our God. Nothing to do with it. But yes, that's another issue for us as pastors' wives. We're always being sized up based on what we wear, how we raise our kids, how we love our husbands, and how we just overall show up. We better be like this. Because the day we come in like this, it's a problem. And so, sisters, we're here to tell you that you are not the problem. You are not the problem. And we want to be a support for you. So we hope that you tune in as we continue to have these courageous conversations, and you'll grab some nuggets on how we can be a support for each other and how you can build community. So we hope to see you next time as we talk about married ministry. God bless.
God bless.